Okay, welcome back to section 8.2, page 3. So here we have the formula for the area of a kite, and it's telling us that it's the same formula that we saw before. And why is that? Well, because the diagonals of a kite are perpendicular. And it said anytime you have diagonals of a quadrilateral that are perpendicular, you can go ahead and use this formula. Okay, so they're perpendicular, so we can use it. Okay, so we're going to prove this. So here's our picture of our kite, and everything's labeled. It might be a little hard to see that this dimension here is, let's go ahead and label it a little bit bigger. This dimension here, this one, is d sub 1. And then this dimension here, okay, is d sub 2. All right? So what I've done is I've separated the kite into two triangles, the top triangle and the bottom triangle. So when we do that, we see that this dimension here, we're going to go ahead and call x for its height. So remember, this is a triangle. So when we're finding the area, so this would be total area equals the area of this triangle. So area of, we're going to say top triangle plus the area of the bottom triangle. Okay, so 1/2 base times height is the formula for the area of a triangle. So let's see what we get here. When we figure this triangle, we're going to say 1/2. What's the base? Well, the base is diagonal 2. You see here, diagonal 2. So this base is diagonal 2. And this dimension here, we know it's part of d sub 1, but we don't know what part, so we're going to call it x. So the base is d sub 2, okay, and the height is x. Okay, then we're adding on to this. When we do this one here, what do we have? Well, remember this whole dimension is d sub 1, okay? So if the top part is x, I'm missing x. So like if this whole thing is 10 and this part is 3, then you'd say 10 minus 3, this would be 7. But we don't know what it is, so we have to use x, okay? So that's what our height is. What is our base? Well, you can see here I labeled it as d sub 2, okay? So we're going to say 1/2, the base is d sub 2, and the height is d sub 1 minus x. Okay, so here I'm going to just make this easier. I'm going to say 1/2 x d sub 2. And then I'm going to add to this. Here, we're going to go ahead and take this piece here, and we're going to distribute it through. Okay, so we're going to have 1/2 d sub 2 d sub 1 minus 1/2 d sub 2x. Now I'm wishing I wouldn't have changed that around. Let's go ahead and leave it as d sub 2x. Okay, so do you notice that you have the same thing here? You have 1/2 d sub 2x, 1/2 d sub 2x. What's left? 1/2 d sub 2 d sub 1, which is exactly what the formula said. Okay? Look up above. 1/2 multiply the two diagonals. Doesn't matter which order they're in. Okay, we're going to try it for this problem here. So we have a kite here, and we know that we're being asked to find the area. So what is the formula for the area? It's 1/2 d sub 1 d sub 2. So 1/2, the first diagonal we can say has a length of 10. What is the second 1/2? Don't say 3, that's only halfway across. You got to go to make it all the way across. What would it be? It would have to be 6, right? Because the diagonals bisect each other. Okay, so we have 1/2. That's not true, what I just said. That diagonal is bisected, not this diagonal, okay? So we have 60. So what do we get? 1/2, or 1/2 times 60 is 30. And we don't know what the units are. Yeah, we do. It's feet. So square feet. And that's the area. Okay, so if you're not sure about me saying that this would be 3, remember that you can show that these two triangles, when we chop it in half here, that they're congruent. So their heights, their altitudes would have to be congruent. So they're both 3. Okay, on to our last problem. It says the numerical difference between the area of a square and the area and the perimeter of a square is 32. Find the length of the side of the square. Okay, so they're saying find the numerical difference. That means subtract. Subtract what's coming up. So what's coming up? Area of the square. So we're going to subtract the area of the square and the perimeter. And it equals 32. Okay, so we're going to take the area of the square. Area of the square. Okay. And then we're going to subtract from it the perimeter of the square. And that equals 32. Okay, so now we know that the area, the formula for the area of a square is base times height, because a square is a special rectangle. And then the perimeter would be at all sides. Okay, so whatever these end up being, and that equals 32. Okay, well, we don't know the side of the square, and that's what we're trying to find. So why don't we call it x? Well, it's a square, so we know that the two sides, or all 4 sides, have to be the same. So let's label them all as x. Okay, then let's go back through this and rewrite it. Base times height, what is that going to be? Well, the base is x and the height is x. So we're going to say x times x. Minus add all the sides. Well, that's going to be x plus x plus x, 4 times. Okay, x times x is x squared. All right, minus all those added up together are 4x. That equals 32. Okay, now I'm really bringing you back to your algebra days here. You have to remember what to do when you have a quadratic equation. That's when your variable is squared. So you're going to move everything over to one side and get 0 on the other. This is the standard way to solve a quadratic equation. So basically what I'm doing is I'm subtracting 32, subtracting 32. So it gives us minus 32 equals 0. Okay, so then we take a look at this, and here again you have to remember, how do you solve this? Do you remember factoring? That's what we're going to do, where you put the x here and the x here. Then you have to think of 2 numbers that multiply to give you negative 32 and add to give you negative 4. Do you remember, you may remember doing this, where you put a negative 32 there and a negative 4 there. So you go through and you think of what are all the things that multiply to give you 32. 4 and 8 comes to mind. 4 times 8 is 32. So you want the bigger number to be negative. So if we put a negative 8 there and a positive 4 there, does that work? Well, negative 8 times 4 is negative 32. And then when we add them, we get negative 4. So sure enough, it does. Well, these are the 2 numbers that belong right in here, negative 8 and plus 4. Now you should always check. X times x is x squared. Then plus 4x minus 8x gives you the negative 4x and minus 32. Then again, you have to remember how to solve. So it's saying 2 things multiplied equals 0. Set each one equal to 0 and see what you get. Okay, so when we solve this one, we're going to add 8. And then what do we get? We get that x equals 8. Well, that seems reasonable. The side of the square would be 8. Here, though, we subtract 4 from both sides, and this is telling us that the side would equal negative 4. Well, this one we have to reject, okay? The side, the length of side of a square can't be negative. All right, so we're going to reject this one. All right, this one works though, and that is the answer. So we would say the length of the side of the square is 8 units. They don't give us units. Okay, that completes section 8.2.